Greetings and salutations, friends, and welcome back to an unprecedented fifth part of the Horus Heresy lore breakdown. We are, of course, still on the first Heretic. And there's a damn good reason why this is going to be such a fat little mini-series, because, good God, there is a lot to talk about in this book. And now we're going to get into an even bigger topic, namely the Eye of Terror, the Ocularis Terribus, discovered by Lorgar as the Wordbearer's fleets pushed further and faster than any other expeditionary fleet, both in an attempt to reassure the wider Imperium that they were indeed good boys that were doing nothing wrong, and of course in the slightly different goal of ensuring that they personally brought as many worlds to compliance as possible, whilst spreading the future seeds of rebellion. We get a rather vivid description of the Eye of Terror from the Wordbearer's astropath. He also describes the singular, relatively stable warp current to and from the Eye of Terror. This relatively narrow passage was one of the key reasons why the Imperium was able to hold off the various Black Crusades launched by a certain Failbadon the Harmless in the distant future. At least until Games Workshop decided to swing their magical plot wand and have half the galaxy explode. Because reasons. But the stupidity of the gathering storm of retardation is not the topic of today's video. Let's get back to Lorgar then, who seems to know pretty much everything the astropath is telling him already. We know that Lorgar has had dreams and visions of something calling to him ever since he was but a wee little religious fanatic back on Colchis. He thought that these were premonitions of the Emperor's arrival, but, well, that seems to be less and less likely as we go through this book. Instead, now it sounds more as if this was a distant echo of the Eye of Terror, or more correctly, the forces who dwell within it calling out to Lorgar. The astropath describes it as an alien voice screaming in human language. Clearly alien, and yet at the same time recognizably human. And I suspect this is for Lorgar's benefit. A bit later on in the book, we will be told that the Custodes will not be able to understand what the locals of a certain world called Cadia are saying, whilst the Wordbearers are insisting that they are speaking Colchisian. Of course, the Custodes speak Colchisian, and what they are hearing is not that. So perhaps this is what the astropath meant. Human words spoken by something clearly alien and unrecognizable. And the creepy screaming is of course not anywhere near the only strange things going on. The warp storms surrounding the Eye of Terror are impassable, and only the one relatively narrow corridor is relatively stable. The word relative in this case being extraordinarily relative, as the C-rated suns were reduced to 2/3 of their full strength with the loss of several ships down the quiet path. One of those ships being the Shield of Scarus, the command vessel of Captain Scarus of the 52nd Company. And the sector was given his name in honor of his loss, the Scarus Sector. Another interesting little tidbit of lore, which, is cute and all, but doesn't necessarily make all that much sense. It would go on Imperial record that the sector was named at Lorgar's behest as the Scarus Sector in honor of a Wordbearer. Something that the new Imperium would probably not be overly interested in upholding, and yet, for some mystifistical fucky-wucky reason, it's still called the Scarus Sector now. I get that Imperial bureaucracy is not overly effective, and maybe they'd overlook it, but having a Scarus Sector in honor of a Wordbearer is kind of like retaining the name Adolf Hitler Street after a certain Austrian corporal. All I'm saying is, no matter how slow and ineffective the Imperial bureaucracy may be, I somehow doubt that this would be one of the things they'd overlook. And speaking of overlooking things, Lorgar produces a charcoal sketch of what in Colchizian legend is referred to as the Immaterium, the gates to heaven, and it looks suspiciously much like the Eye of Terror. This Lorgar considers to be definitive proof that this must be the roadway to heaven. Yeah, heaven indeed. Paradise on Earth, a realm of infinite possibilities and so on. And Lorgar tells himself that this is what he's looking for. A paradise. Literally heaven. Whilst his astropath is sitting next to him and going, Lord, no, it screams at us, it yells, it shouts, it screams in pain. And Lorgar's just like, no. It's not screaming, it's repeating my name over and over again. Which really should have the astropath just open up his sightless eyes, gaze up at Lorgar and go, that doesn't make it any better. In fact, you'd think that would make it worse. Like, oh, hey, this is a place in which space quite literally screams in alien tongues whilst mimicking the human language, and Lorgar's just like, this really speaks to me. Yeah, that is the problem. But, of course, Lorgar wouldn't be Lorgar if he saw nothing wrong with this and headed down to the planet, which we will later know as Cadia. Indeed, even the local populace refer to it as such, and it is populated by humans. Which is yet another one of those things which sounds really cute, like, aha, it's Cadia, but hold on a second. How the fuck did this happen? We're near to the Eye of Terror, where the Eldars murder-fucked a god into existence and crushed their entire empire. And there's humans here? How? When? The fuck? This is one of those continuity things that Games Workshop has never really explained. How did the Great Human Federation of the Golden Age of Technology exist alongside the Eldar Empire at the height of their power? Or did it exist before? In which case, why would the Eldar let a random world so close to their heart worlds at the time just remain populated by humans? A zoo or something? And if vice versa, why would the Great Human Federation head into this absolutely horrible ass backwards place and decide, yeah, this seems fun, let's live here? You know, that does make a whole lot of sense. If anything, it would make more sense that these people were gathered here by the Chaos Gods, since the entire purpose of this population appears to be to trap Lorgar. The population knew of his arrival. They had gathered to meet him, and Ingethel, the shaman who have come to speak to him, speaks his language. He says that she speaks Colchizian, while she of course says that he speaks the language of her home world. She also knows that he is called Lorgar Aurelian, Aurelian being the name only used by the word-bearers. She also knows about his adoptive father, and how that father has betrayed him, whilst his real forefathers are ever so proud. This speaks to a very long-term plan on behalf of the Chaos Gods, that they had prepared this for eons, probably from the very moment that the Emperor stole their secrets, but there are some problems with this. A good long-term plot filled with coinkydinks that all turn out to be parts of a greater whole can be a really, really cool story device. But it is difficult to pull that off correctly, because what you need to do is have a series of seemingly unrelated events that, when you look at them from a certain angle, turn out to be a complete whole. In this case, however, we don't really get that. So, the people of Cadia speak Colchizian, although they don't actually speak Colchizian. The Custodies don't hear Colchizian language, they don't see Colchizian writing, and yet the word-bearers keep insisting that it is Colchizian, archaic, but definitely Colchizian, suggesting that they have been placed under some kind of chaotic influence, possibly even interwoven with their very DNA, but how? Messing with Lorgar's mind would be one thing, because, well, he spent a little bit more time in the warp than what is necessarily healthy, heading to cultures from the Emperor's laboratory, but the Wordbearers? They were created from his DNA, sure, but that was the DNA before he went to Colchis, the genetic blueprint of the Primark. And it also seems unlikely that all of them have been affected by some kind of Legion-wide spell, with nobody noticing. None of the astropaths, none of the psychically sensitive individuals within the Wordbearers, nobody. So why can they understand Ingethel and the locals, whilst the Custodies listen to this and hear nothing but Xeno's speech? It could potentially be a psychic trick, I suppose, like when the astropath said that this was an alien voice trying to speak in human language, but again, the Custodies would surely have noticed. Again, they are infiltration and intelligence specialists as much as they are warriors. No way they wouldn't have operatives within the Wordbearers capable of checking on them on a psychic level. The third possibility is that understanding this language is an effect of understanding the old Colchissian religion, as if this was woven into it eons ago. This sounds more likely, but it leads us back to a bit of a problem. Lorgar had to be indoctrinated into the old Colchissian religion for this plan to function. He then also had to reject that religion and burn it to the ground in the name of the Emperor, who he was currently having nightmares about and shitting his bed at daily, and then decide to worship that very same Emperor as a reason to burn down the old Colchissian culture. Okay, right. Bit of a stretch, but fair enough. Then the Emperor would have to arrive on the planet and be so taken with Lorgar that he wouldn't see the obvious chaos influence of Colchis and choose to accept him. As we talked about previously, the Emperor undoubtedly knew that this had something to do with chaos. To assume that he didn't is vaguely insane. He's the foremost expert on chaos within the Imperium, if not the foremost expert in the bloody galaxy, with possibly the exception of the Eldar. And he wouldn't have noticed something as obvious as this. Zephyr even goes on to say that the rituals being carried out on Cadia are very reminiscent of the ones carried out on Colchis. And since he's willing to tell this to a Custodes, then these rituals are hardly secret or anything, so surely the Emperor must have known. And again, whilst the Emperor was certainly very happy with Lorgar for having overthrown this religion, but how far can you really push that explanation before it starts sounding really odd? How many chaotic flies need to be drowning in the Emperor's soup before he starts thinking that something's off about all of this? Not to mention, this entire plan also rests on the idea that the Emperor would be an overly doting father, would see Lorgar clearly influenced by a chaotic religion, but that he rejected, and then yet see him carry over all of his religious thinking into the Imperium, despite any attempts he makes at getting him away from that, and then still think, okay, I'm gonna let it go for 100 fucking years, before then finally acting. And then the plan relies on him acting harshly enough to antagonize Lorgar to the point that he is willing to just reject his life purpose out of hand, and then turn to a barely remembered ancient religion that he himself once rejected, but it also relies on the fact that the Emperor would have to be a nice enough dude to not simply put a bolt round in Lorgar's skull the moment he arrives on the planet and sees the goddamn temples to the 4 Chaos deities and the religious text mentioning Khorne, Zine, Shalesh, and Nurgle by their bloody names. It's like, we have clearly reached the point where cool coincidences have transcended into little more than painfully obvious plot points, which is a bit of the problem. But oh well, what has happened and all that. Next, we arrive at a bit of an interesting scene where Lorgar is standing watching Ingethel carry out some sort of ritual in the Temple of the Eye deep beneath the earth, where several human sacrifices have already been carried out from amongst the tribesmen in an effort to seek the answers that Lorgar are looking for. When the rest of the Wordbearers arrive, including Vendetta, the Custodes, things get heated rather quickly. Argel Tal confronts Lorgar and asks him how he could have allowed this, how he can continue to allow this. But his conversation with Lorgar is interrupted by Vendetta, unsurprisingly so, deciding that this is enough for now, and tries to place Lorgar under arrest. Lorgar refuses to come to Terra, and Vendetta tries to call down his buddies via a teleportation beacon built into his armor, but its signal has been blocked. This raises a couple of questions. One, why is there only one Custodes? And why is the Custodes with Argel Tal instead of Lorgar, the person they're really supposed to be looking after? Now, the Custodes have been relaxing their watch over the Wordbearers a fair bit, but allowing Lorgar to wander around here with these religious savages, despite all of the strange writing, the fact that it's called Chizian but clearly not called Chizian, and so on, without any increased guard is odd, but okay. And then it's Vendetta's teleport beacon, which is blocked. You would think that that alone would get the Custodes to come running. Hey, Aquilon, one of our dudes just dropped off the radar and we can't contact him anymore, and we've lost his teleportation homing signature. Should we be worried? But Aquilon's just like, nah, it's fine. He's amongst friends. The Wordbearers are good guys after all. And of course, upon seeing that Ven's backup is not coming, the Wordbearers get rather antsy. They may be starting to question why Lorgar is allowing this shit to go on, but he's still their Primark, and the Custodes are not exactly popular within the Legion. And so they draw their weapons, preparing to defend their liege lord with their lives. Lorgar then gives Ven a choice. Try to kill him now, or escape, and bring news of this up to the surface. And Vendetta decides to try and kill Lorgar. Okay, I mean, I kind of understand why he chose that, but really, dude? You've got the balls and the confidence to take on a Primark and the top leadership of the Wordbearers alone when he gave you the possibility of, leaving and doing this the proper way? I mean, okay. I can, again, I'm not saying that a Custodes wouldn't make that choice. I'm just saying that it would be a remarkably dumb, rash, and ill-thought-out choice to make. But hey, as Patton said, a good plan executed violently now is better than a perfect plan executed tomorrow. Except Ven then goes on to attack, cuts his way through several of the Wordbearers' leadership, and then stops in front of Lorgar, with Zaphen's bolter pointed straight at him, and decides to request Lorgar to surrender again. Why? If Vendetta is so aggressive, so throw caution to the wind because a Primarch's reflexes are so incredibly fast, they're so great, so awesome, so quick, so strong, beyond human capacity to even imagine, that his only chance is to strike quickly and with overwhelming force, why then does he just stop? I cannot come up with a single conceivable reason. It's just a retarded thing for the character to do. It makes sense from a plot perspective because it needs the Custodes to be shown as aggressive, uncaring, that they don't give a shit about the truth, and it needs to paint Lorgar and his captains into a corner where they have to share a terrible secret which they might otherwise run screaming to the Custodes about, telling them, yeah, you're right, these people are fucking crazy. But it's just so dumb from the character's perspective. It's having your cake and eating it too, isn't it? On the one hand, Vendetta is completely cray-cray and just attacks Lorgar because he thinks this shit is evil, which it kind of is. But then, when he has Lorgar dead to right, he then stops and gives Zaphen a chance to shoot him in the face, saving Lorgar. Which then also, of course, results in the Wordbearers having killed a Custodes, something they wouldn't have if Ren just had turned around and told his boss about this. Yet another, illogical coincidence thrown atop the pile. And with this, the Custodes becomes the final sacrifice, the one offered by Lorgar himself to summon the demon that possesses Ingethel, their Cadian guide. And Ingethel, the massive, horrible, demonic monstrosity, informs Lorgar that it has all the answers he seeks, and that they are all terrible, universally so, and that he's gonna fucking kill his sons, and that Lorgar needs to hand them over. You gotta respect the fact that he doesn't even attempt to sugarcoat this. I mean, it's just like, yep, I'm gonna kill him, alright. I'm gonna hurt him. No attempt at subterfuge whatsoever, because as Ingethel itself says, it knows that Lorgar will never not go for the answers. And fuck, even his own sons know that. See, that's probably the saddest part. Afterwards, Argel Tal is outside having explained away Ven's death to the rest of the Custodes, which just lap this up, which is another odd thing, but okay, fine. I mean, hell, at least it comes from Argel Tal, somebody they kinda trust, so okay, alright. And he too says, Argel Tal that is, that, Lorgar's not gonna like it, but he's gonna send us to get fucked by demons. He doesn't even question it. You, my son, can never commit acts of cruelty with a smile. Nope, and he sure as fuck can commit them. I think this is strike 3, or is it 4 on that account now? Anywho, Ingethel will be loaded aboard the Orthus Lament and sent into the Eye of Terror, and it takes Lorgar like 2 days or something to decide to send his sons to death and torture. I have pondered upon questions like what to eat the next Saturday, or whether or not I should get a haircut, than the amount of time it takes Lorgar to decide to send his sons to death and torture. I'm starting to see why I don't like this guy. Anywho, Argel Tal and the crew of the Orpheus Lament are sent off to their inevitable doom. 100 wordbearers and 1,000 mortals shipped off to get turned into cat food. Oh, demon food in this case. And whilst I do keep racking on this book quite a lot, because it deserves it, it really does. This book receives way too much praise for such a shoddy work on many, many occasions, but the way that it describes the madness that comes over the bridge crew, just by the mere presence of Ingethel here, is a work of beauty. It really is. It is disconcerting, it is creepy, it is chaotic, it is frightening, and it fully conveys just how monstrous of a creature Ingethel is. And it's only slightly ruined by the fact that the Astartes afterward suggest, maybe we should bring this thing to the observation bridge instead of the command bridge. Like, you fucking what, Argel Tal? Why did you do this then? Why did you bring it to the bridge? And sadly, once again, we kind of return to the idea that the only reason why the thing was ever moved to the bridge in the first place was so that we could see it do horrible things to the bridge crew. But still, excellent descriptions, just not strictly necessary ones. Moving on, Ingethel continues to do nice and cuddly things to the wordbearers, in this case by showing them the fall of the Eldar Empire, or more correctly, the death of one of their most outlying worlds. And Ingethel says something rather interesting here. The demon claims that the Eldar Empire did not fall, that it was not shattered. In reality, the only reason why they fell at all was because they failed to embrace chaos. That they failed to truly appreciate what they had birthed into the galaxy, that once they viewed the gorgeousness that was She Who Thirsts, they turned away in disgust. And so the price for that was the shattering of their empire, the destruction of their worlds, and the near annihilation of their race. This suggests that there was a way for the Eldar to live alongside chaos. But I don't know if this is really the truth. Bear in mind, this is a demon. Demons tend to make their truths laced with just a hint of truth, so as to make their lies seem all the sweeter. Because we know from the Eldar, although, well, no, this will be a he said, she said, I suppose, that once Slaanesh was born, the first action of this newborn deity was to sweep up those who still adored her and devoured them. As you can probably imagine, that might not be the ascension that the Eldar were hoping for. In all due likelihood here, we have a bit of a confusion of terms, shall we say. The demon is telling the wordbearers that, oh, we could have coexisted in beautiful, peaceful harmony like ebony and ivory. Whilst in reality, what the demon means is, oh, if only the Eldar had become food for us, then they could have coexisted within the warp as souls, in eternal torment, being torn apart time and time again by warp predators, serving as little more than our playthings and subsistence. I mean, technically speaking, that is still coexistence. And speaking of a fate most horrible, advertisement. Well, that wasn't literal hell, I hope, so welcome back again to Ingethel's story time. The wordbearers are not entirely convinced by Ingethel's visions. They see hell, a really, really, really horrible place. And naturally, upon looking at that, they figure, this looks like it fucking sucks. I don't care how true this is. We're not bringing this back to the Imperium. We are not tearing the Imperium apart for this. But Ingethel has a few more tricks up his sleeve. He will show the wordbearers the Emperor's laboratory, where he is just laying the finishing touches on his 20 sons. And Ingethel says a couple of very interesting little things here. One, he keeps referring to the Emperor as the Anathema, showing us again that the Emperor is literally the opposite to them, a destructive force, their nemesis, an implacable foe that will be the death of them if he is not stopped. And Ingethel also says that now, just as the Emperor is finishing things up, this is when the Eldar Empire is burning. So this means that according to this book at least, the Great Human Federation took place before the Eldar. But what then about the Old Ones? Did they coexist with the Old Ones? Were they one of the races created by the Old Ones? But that also does not make entirely sense, because the Eldar knew of humanity back when it was in its most basic form, when they were little more than legged fishes wandering out of the swamps. And so, how then could humanity's golden age have come to pass? How could they have travelled the galaxy, all the way to the Eye of Terror, apparently, if Ingethel can be believed? This doesn't seem to make any sense. There is no mention in Eldar history of a vast human empire coexisting with them, and certainly not one that would be allowed to travel into the heart of their empire and settle worlds so close to their capital. And this also goes on to Ingethel saying that we are now in the past, and yet if Argel Tal touches anyone who interferes with their work and draws attention to himself, then the Emperor will immediately eradicate them, suggesting that the Emperor is able to find their presence whilst they are apparently time-travelling. There seems to be two errors of continuity in Ingethel's story here. One, that they are at the point in time in which the Eldar race is burning, and yet the Imperium is just about ready to rise. And two, that the Emperor will somehow be able to react to their threat in the past. Now yes, the warp certainly works by its own set of rules, so time travel is not necessarily impossible, but this seems very unlikely. And why, if they truly are time traveling, can the Emperor react in that way to destroy somebody from the future? This brings into question a whole set of different problems with time travel, doesn't it? A whole series of continuity problems. If Argel Tal is destroyed, then Argel Tal could not exist. If Argel Tal could not exist, he could not bat away the first few rounds fired at Lorgar by Vendetta beneath the Temple of the Eye, meaning that Lorgar would be killed down there, meaning that this would never take place either way. And really, we could keep going in circles like this for all eternity, so it seems far more plausible to suggest that this is not the past. This is some form of illusion shown to the word-bearers whilst within the demon's own realm. A realm in which creating an illusion like this would be no trouble whatsoever for a demon. It would also explain why the demon grows so panicky when the word-bearer approaches the cryogenic pods of the 13th and 11th Primarks. Primarks that they may wish to, interact with more directly, and if they were to do so, well, that might reveal the illusion, mightn't it? As for the 11th Primark, honestly, I don't want to speculate about the Lost Legions, because Games Workshop have essentially come out and stated that they are never going to reveal anything hard about them. They exist so that people can come up with their own headcanon. And again, as I've said previously, any explanation that Games Workshop comes up with at this point is almost certainly going to be worse than the mystery. But there is at the very least one interesting thing. They mention that the 13th, the Ultramarines, saw a significant boost in their size and recruitment numbers after the fall of the 11th. Interesting. So they must have been a legion then operating in the roughly same area of space as the 13th, or possibly even the 13th accepted refugees, traitors, survivors of the 11th. Again, any speculation here is essentially pointless, but cool nevertheless. We also get to have a little bit of a closer look at one of the incubation pods, apparently having, again, quote-unquote, Colchizian runes on it, beseeching outside forces for strength and so on. Which indicates again that the Primarchs are more than a result of pure science, and more something hybridized between science and the warp, but clearly the warp in a far more focused and directed fashion. There's nothing chaotic about how the Primarchs have been wrought. They are far too standardized for that. There are differences in their psychology, their physiology, of course, but by and large, they are Primarchs. They can be identified as Primarchs, and the deviation between them are no greater than we might see in humans, with one notable exception being Sanguinius, but, well, he also got dosed in a bit more warp than anybody would find entirely healthy. And Engethel tells this to the wordbearers, that the Primarchs are partially the work of the Chaos Gods, and that the Emperor has betrayed them, that he has taken these 20 sons from them and paid no price. And this pisses the wordbearers off, which I personally find kind of amusing. Moments ago they were like, wow, chaos is awful, I mean this is literally hell. And then, when Ingethel is telling them that the Emperor managed to screw the Chaos Gods, the Emperor literally outfoxed the gods, who are claiming to be omnipotent, by the way. Like, oh yes, these Gellerfields will fail in 37 beats of your heart. Whilst clearly they didn't see the Emperor fucking them coming over the horizon. And the fact that the Primarchs are the results of both science and magic, quote-unquote, that is the thing that pisses off the wordbearers enough to scatter the Primarchs across the galaxy and set into motion Chaos's plan. Ingethel quite plainly tells them, this is how the plan begins. If you stop me here, I guess I'm boned. And again, this happens moments after the word bearer's like, wow, Chaos is horrible and we should not be getting involved in this in any way, shape, and form. Wow. That is quite the 360. And the best part too is, Ingethel tells them before this that, yeah, you are genetically slaved to Lorgar. And for like a quarter of a second, the word-bearers are a little bit disturbed by this, before then doing something that only Lorgar would benefit from, crashing through the Gallowfields, revealing the Primarks to the Chaos Gods and scattering them across the galaxy. Again, assuming that this is actually a trip through time. Honestly, I don't think we can make any truly logical decision based on this, because we are given too many inconsistencies, both in the timeline, in the logic of the events, in the happenstances, in the reactions of the characters, etc., to truly be able to determine whether or not this actually happened, or if this is simply the demon pushing them one last step. Instead of merely showing them what happened, giving them a detached relationship to the action, it makes them commit to the rebellion. It makes them strike a figurative blow against the Emperor, against his betrayal, which, I find it baffling. The word-bearers think this is a betrayal. The Emperor fucking over their gods, the so-called omnipotent gods, to avoid chaos running rampant across the galaxy and doing to humanity what they did to the Eldar. Aha. Interesting. I guess the word-bearers bought the idea that humanity could coexist with chaos, which, again, after seeing Ingethel's effect on mortal humans, I'm just like, how the fuck are you buying this? Ingethel is a being of such monstrosity that humans are driven to murder and insanity by its mere smell and presence. Well, I mean, it says we can coexist, so why would it lie? It seems like such a friendly being after all. Though at the very least it does present one piece of proof for why all of that which had just transpired was actually real, namely Argel Tal's shattered swords of red iron. Though I will say proof with heavy quotation marks, because it would be no trick at all for a demon like Ingethel to shatter and scorch a pair of swords, especially within the warp. And additionally, we get to learn that Lorgar was kept inside of the Immaterium for far longer than any of the others. Indeed, his pod was compromised, and they were able to reach inside of it. In all due likelihood, Lorgar's psychic gift, his nightmares, were not a psychic gift at all, not a manifestation of any real psychic potential, but instead a result of the gods of chaos subtly reworking his DNA. This could also potentially explain why he is the only one who can hear them calling out for him. But of course, infecting Lorgar is not enough. So after all these revelations, Ingethel demands that the word-bearers lower the Gallowfields and let his brethren inside, to make sure that even if the word-bearers were to think better of this later, that maybe bringing literal hell into the material world was a bad idea, he's going to make sure that they have some company in their minds. I particularly like how Ingethel also keeps saying that if the word-bearers don't do this, then humanity will be wiped out, they will be destroyed by the aliens, and that they name the Emperor Anathema not because he's a danger to them, unlike what they told to Horus. At least they had more respect for him and didn't lie to him as outright as they do to the word-bearers, but because that he is anathema to human life. Which is really rich coming from the Chaos Gods, to be absolutely sure. And once again, Argel Tal just buys this. And I can find no other reason for it than because of his loyalty to Lorgar, knowing that this is the truth, and so regardless of how horrible it may be, they should still pursue the truth. Because Argel Tal so far has shown himself to be somebody who likes humans, generally speaking. And when he saw the human sacrifices and the eventual sacrifice of the Custodes on Cadia, he resisted these things. He didn't want them. He is probably the most human character so far, and yet again he just goes like, okay, sure, go ahead. There seems to be so little basis for his decisions here, other than the literal words of a demon. He seems to take Ingethel just at face value for all of this. Yes, the Eldar were torn apart and thrown into the warp to be raped for all eternity, but trust me, we're not going to do that to humanity. You're our chosen children, after all. Didn't you say just a while ago, Ingethel, that the Eldars were the chosen worshippers of Slaanesh? How well did that work out again? Oh, right, that didn't work out at all, did it? And the demon even has the balls to show the warp affecting Lorgar and keeping him for, as Ingethel said, decades. So, Lorgar was kept in the warp, changed in God Emperor only knows what ways, and the only reason why Argel Tal and his word-bearers were sent into the Eye in the first place, to bring this terrible truth to humanity, is because Lorgar insisted upon it, because Lorgar ordered them to. And Argel Tal chooses to continue on with Lorgar's wishes, despite now undoubtedly knowing that Lorgar has been compromised. And, again, not a single word-bearer questions this. Not one of the 100 brothers, who have all apparently seen just what he has seen, questions this. None of them protest, none of them refuse orders, none of them go, hey, maybe we shouldn't be lowering the Geller fields just yet. Maybe we should bring this news back first and then consider doing that. They are all once again in complete lockstep. The word-bearers, in reality, are no more than slaves to Lorgar's ambition. Ingethel may say that there is no critical flaw in their gene seed, that they are not compelled to loyalty, and the word-bearers themselves might even believe it if they really try. But the evidence seems to suggest otherwise. They even tried to resist. After the Geller fields had been lowered, after all and everything that Ingethel had promised had come to pass, then they resisted. Argel Tal invited this onto the ship. He gave the order for this to happen, and yet still he fought back. What more evidence could you possibly need that the word-bearers are not truly in command of their own actions? But of course, it was all in vain. Ingethel had his puppets, and the word-bearers now had brand new passengers in their skulls. Out of the original 100 word-bearers aboard the Orpheus Lament, only 40 would make it back to the fleet. It would take them half a year of slowly drifting through the warp to break out into real space once again. During that time, the survivors would kill, eat, and drink the blood of their brethren to stay alive. The crew, of which there had been once 1,000 mortals, were all dead as well, drained of blood. The Astartes could eat their leathery flesh, but they still had nothing to drink. The water containers had burst once the Geller fields had been blown open, and everything else that was aboard, engine oil, lubricants, and such on, were all too devoured by the word-bearers. Too stupid, I assume, to figure out that in all due likelihood, drinking that would cost them more it would gain them, until, well, desperation forced them to turn upon their brothers. And out of the 100, only 3 did not awake. They were all killed by Ingethel and his demonic kind, but then possessed and resurrected. All but 3. 3 word-bearers rejected the truth. 3 word-bearers rejected hell and chaos. 3 out of 100. The last 3 loyal word-bearers in practically the whole Legion. Not good odds, is it? And with that, I'll wrap up another episode. It's a bit quicker now that we've gotten out of the really heavy shit and moved into something that flows a little bit better, so maybe, just maybe, we'll only need 1 more part. We'll have to wait and see. Until then, thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.